You might be thinking of ABL.
ABL. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I
Yeah,
love ABL.
yeah. Why do you like ABL?
I love ABL space. Disclaimer, I'm a personal investor,
This is yeah.
and I love them because of a few reasons. They are incredibly operationally efficient. They've spent in their entire lifespan what some of their competitors burn in a few months, which is pretty insane. Their unit economics are really, really solid. And those two things normally I don't like as differentiators in business, but the market for launch isn't the non-SpaceX market for launch isn't that big.
No.
And so, as you know, you cover this
I've
stuff.
told you I wouldn't I've told you before, like, I wouldn't invest in the launch companies
Yeah, yeah,
a little bit.
yeah. Well, the reason I would is because I think it's so hard to get to space, and then I look at like you literally like you look at the non-SpaceX companies, and it's like, can they get to space? Are they venture backed? Like, do they play in like a payload capacity that really makes them interesting kind of business wise? And you look at all these factors and like you end up with like 4 or 5 companies,
Mm,
and then you can cut those. I think really like on it, my prediction would be to get specific here. It's like SpaceX, the 800-pound gorilla. They'll like on a terminal basis be like at least half the market, and then I think you'll see ABL relativity because they're playing a right payload capacity range, and relativity's just done a great job fundraising, even though I'm more biased ABL. And then I think you'll see obviously Rocket Lab, which is operationally stable and has been launching rockets since I think 2017 or something
a
like that.
and
They'll
when you
they'll continue as well.
and when you say payload range, do you mean, like, small sats compared to so satel SpaceX will take the larger payloads, and then you're saying they'll compete on the smaller satellites? What do you mean
Y
payload range?
Yeah, 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 exactly. So, yeah, they'll compete on the smaller satellites. SpaceX is now in a Starship's 120 ton. Crazy.
Yeah.
It's, like, so unprecedented. But, yeah, even compared to, like, Falcon 9, these guys are playing in smaller ranges. So, the reason I would even differentiate between a lot of the small sat or what are called small sat launchers, like, where I'd say I think Rocket Lab, and this could be wrong, but I think they're like 250 to 300 kilograms. Like they're significantly smaller in payload capacity than relativity and ABL. And I think the relativity ABL payload capacity opens up more business.
Mm,
But Rocket Labs, I mean, just they've had like amazing sort of price leverage because they've been the only game in town outside of SpaceX.
yeah,
And they're an awesome company. I think anybody that makes it into space is so cool and
yeah.
deserves everybody's support. So what do you think? Because I know you look at a lot of this stuff too.
I mean, the thing is, like, I don't think I would be able to choose winners within such a competitive market because even though it is only like 6, 6 or however many companies are trying to launch rockets and it's still such a rare thing, it's still so hard to be like, I would rather invest in something that has 0 competition. This is
Mhm.
this is just the classic Peter Thiel kind of thing. Like, I think and this isn't related to space, but just the first thing that comes to mind and what we were talking about beforehand is Michael Levin's bioelectricity. Like,
Yeah.
he's starting a startup now. Like, he's raising money,
Yeah.
and he's for those that don't know, like, he's working on regenerating limbs using bioelectricity because
Amazing.
he essentially thinks, like, we shouldn't be genetically engineering humans. Like, we already have growth pathways from when we were babies to become adults. So we can just re-stimulate those with bioelectricity. And like, nobody's doing that. Like,
So crazy.
nobody else. So like,
Nobody else.
that's what I would, if there were like 5 other people doing bioelectricity, then I, I think what it comes down to is
Yeah.
I don't think as an investor and not like as somebody who's actively researching and building in the space, I
Yeah.
think I'm just actually not smart enough to be able to be like, okay, yes, this is the one.
The one thing I will say in defense of launch
And
is it's so hard to pull off that it then creates this like exciting right tail call option on like the space market has shifted so much, so dramatically. Like I was actually like looking at talking with a friend about, past valuations for SpaceX, and it was like a $350 million this in like
mm,
2008, which is like it's absurd, like how like low of a valuation that is,
yeah,
given that it was like kind of the only game in town. But the market was like super speculative, and the big thing that people kind of slept on over the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years was pre-Starlink announcing, its Leo constellation. That wasn't really considered as a use case or as big of a use case in space. And then you got this kind of like competitive mimetic effect where, it was like Amazon Kuiper and Telesat and obviously OneWeb, I think might have even been before Starlink. And all these guys sort of popped up. And that really created its own kind of really big commercial comms market on top of the existing one. And I think you'll see things like that happen with space. I think it's shifting really fast. And again, that sounds slightly vague, but it feels like crypto did like early on, where it's so like wild, wild west-y and things are getting figured out so quickly. Like you look at a company like Varda, like, like I really like those guys. I don't know, whether it'll work. Like I'm not deep enough on the tech, but it's fucking awesome that they're like trying
I love
that.
Varda. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I
And like, yeah, what were you
I
say?
I was gonna say I like Varda because it's something that's built on top of, like, what is enabled by SpaceX. And so that
Mhm,
wasn't able to be done, like, up to maybe, like, a year ago or something. Like, it's
mhm,
only just become possible to actually build that startup. So then you have less people trying to compete there, I think.
totally.
So, like, I'm very interested. Even though I don't like launch companies for investing personally, I'm very interested in startups that are built on top of what the launch companies enable.
Yep.
Uh, that's
Yeah,
yeah, because like Starlink was enabled by SpaceX, and I think Starlink could be a bigger business than just their SpaceX launches. Because Elon said like
totally.
launches are capped around 8 billion or so, and then Starlink, I mean, providing internet around the world, I mean, that's multiple tens of billions. So
100%. And all of a sudden you're talking about software multiples and like launch is not a great like in this classic sense, it's not what you look for in a business. It's like any single one could fail. The margins aren't like amazing. It's like super hard to like set up each launch. There's like regulatory bullshit you have to go through each time.
yeah.
It's not like easy. Yeah. So I think having a huge Leo constellation, just like serving a bunch of people. Yeah, that's it. That's a much better visit. Which I think, by the way, was part of the strategy. 4 or 5 years ago. I think that definitely went into because if you think about it, SpaceX launch alone with SpaceX, it's like to me, it doesn't surpass like, you know, 30 to 20 to $30 billion business,
Mhm.
maybe you
Yeah.
get super high multiples because it's like really unique and hard to do. But yeah, because of
Yeah.
all the factors we mentioned, it's like not an amazing,
Mhm.
intrinsic business.
Speaking of like interesting things being built, you're invested in a startup building planes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What was the name of that startup again?
They're called Regent Craft
Okay.
and they're awesome. They're super cool.
Yo, what's up, everyone? I hope you guys enjoyed that clip. I have more clips on the channel, and the full podcast is linked in the description. And I got some more cool interviews coming soon. So I'll see you guys in the future. Peace.